One of the hardest things to do when it comes to conflict in marriage is to actually see some value in and respect your spouse's opinions and perspective on a situation. In fact, probably the reason you're in conflict is because you and your spouse have different perspectives on a decision, a situation, or some issue in your marriage. So in this video, I have one goal. I'm going to help you learn how you can see value in your spouse's perspective about things that you're in conflict with and how that can change everything about your marriage. That's today on RelationShots. Hey, welcome to RelationShots. If this is your first time hanging out with us, don't forget to download your free guide to intimacy. You will see a link in the description area below. In that, we cover 4 areas of intimacy: physical, spiritual, recreational, and emotional, and give you some tips on how you can increase connection in your relationship. So as we jump in and talk about this one goal I have for you, which is how you can see value in your spouse's perspective, let me start with an old Jewish story. There was a rabbi who was well known for helping couples solve marital issues. And he was meeting with a particular couple, having a session with the wife and then a session with the husband as one of his students watched. So the wife came in and the rabbi listened to her complain on and on and on about her marriage. And at the end, he said, "You are absolutely right. You put up with so much in your marriage. I have tremendous admiration for you." And the wife said, "Thank you so much, Rabbi. It means so much to know that you see my viewpoint." And then he met with the husband, who also spent the entire time complaining on and on and on about what he had to deal with his wife. And at the end, the rabbi said, "You are absolutely right. You put up with so much in this marriage. I have tremendous admiration for you." To which the husband said, "Thank you, Rabbi. It means a lot to have somebody so important actually see and understand my viewpoint." And then they left. And the student looked at the rabbi confused and said, "I don't get it. They can't both be completely right." To which the rabbi said, "You are absolutely right." And the reality is there are 2 perspectives on every conflict, and both of those are all right to the person who has that perspective. So here's the reality for your marriage. If in conflict, you do not have the ability to see value or respect your spouse's opinion or perspective on it, you will never have a chance of actually resolving conflict in your marriage. Because here's what we do. We tend to, in conflict, see ourselves oftentimes as all good and see our spouse, who is now our adversary, as all bad. And when you see that, it will make it impossible for you to resolve conflict. There's a social psychologist named Fritz Heider who has coined a term for this called fundamental attribution error, which basically says, "I'm okay, you're defective." And that is the perspective that most spouses take when they were in a conflict with their significant other. And if you're honest with yourself, we tend to give ourselves a little more grace in all areas of our relationship than we actually do our spouse. We tend to judge ourselves based on our motive, while at the same time judging our spouse based on what they did and assigning intent to it, right? We'll be like, "Well, I didn't mean it to come out that way," but at the same time, we'll turn around and be all, "Well, those are the words you used," while they're trying to say, "That's not what I meant." And so we will go ahead and want to be understood in context, even if we don't get it right, while at the same time, we want to hold our spouse accountable for not getting it exactly right. So what happens in our marriage is this fundamental attribution error of us thinking we are mostly good, our spouse is mostly bad, actually is preventing us from having any chance of resolving conflict in the relationship. So what do we do about that? The answer is simple. We flip the fundamental attribution error on its head. And the way we do that is 2 parts. Number 1, whenever we see a positive quality in ourselves, we need to also assume that our spouse has that same positive quality. If you think you're patient, if you think you serve a lot, if you think you're giving, if you think you're kind, instead of looking at your spouse and thinking they're not that, you need to assume they have the exact same positive quality that you have. And on the flip side, every time you see a negative quality in your spouse, you need to turn around and acknowledge that you too sometimes exhibit that same negative quality. So when you look at your spouse and go, "God, that was so selfish," you got to quickly look in the mirror and say, "You know what? I can be selfish at times too. Or when you look at your spouse and go, like, I can't believe they didn't think of me. You got to stop and say, you know what? There's times that I only think about myself as well. Or on the positive side, when we think, you know what? I'm really kind. We need to also say, you know what? My spouse can be kind at times too. Or you know what? I remember when they also were nice to me last time I was sick and offered to get me something. And so instead of our tendency going into every conflict, which is the natural inclination of all of us to think that we are right, that our spouse is wrong, that we're mostly good, that they're mostly not, we need to flip that on its head by seeing good qualities in them that we know we have, and by seeing bad qualities in us that we're looking at in them. And when we do that, we actually are positioning ourselves to be able to see value in our spouse's opinion and perspective in a situation, and only from that lens are we able to possibly come up with a resolution to our conflict. So instead of looking at yourself through rose-colored lenses and looking at your spouse through a critical lens every time, we need to flip that around. And if you can do that, and if you can see value in your spouse's perspective, you have stepped towards the possibility of actually resolving conflict in the relationship. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on this below. Do you have a tendency to succumb to the fundamental attribution error? I'm okay, you're defective. And if so, how's that impacting you in your relationship? Drop a comment, let's chat about it. And until next time, I'll see you right back here on RelationShots.